let's just say the economy starts to fall on top of your head, and
I knew that I wasn't going to survive. The business wasn't going to survive.
but I'm also a firm believer that if you
Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us again, Chris Worden. And today I'm joined with another director who has worked with us at Director First over the last few months. And they're going to be sort of sharing what it was really like to place a business into liquidation, sort of what happened, but more importantly, what are they like today having taken this step? So thank you very, very much for joining us, Imran. I really appreciate your time today.
no, thank you for having me on your show. I've been watching you on YouTube now for a while, because let's just say when you are a company, it's a lonely world for one because you're at the top and you don't have many people to talk to. So you sort of cocoon yourself and you get lost in your own thoughts. And then all of a sudden, let's just say the economy starts to fall on top of your head, and things have become a lot more expensive these days, Chris. And outgoings have increased, income in my field, which is basically e-commerce. We were an online wholesaler. Um, and you could just say that from every which direction, we just had obstacle after obstacle. And I know in business, they say you keep going, you keep going. But I'm also a firm believer that if you learn something along the way and your journey kind of goes in a different direction, you have to chop and change. And so I was stuck in a position where my outgoings had increased tenfold. My income, due to unforeseen circumstances, had basically become minuscule. And it was a case of, how do I afford the bills at the end of the month? And when you've got staff to pay, wages, stock to put on the shelf, and companies to pay let's just say stress gets the better of you. Your brain stops functioning as it normally does. Logic goes out the window. You stop eating. You stop sleeping. Let's put it that way.
I've
Um,
been there. Listen,
yeah,
I've been there. Like, I genuinely know how you felt because that's how I got into this industry. I'm like, I didn't come up through the ranks of a
yeah.
normal insolvency guy. I literally was on the other end of an insolvency about 8 or 9 years ago.
You definitely
Couldn't
made the
sleep.
best of the worst situation, I can say.
Yeah, well, do you know what it was? Is like, I am, despite what people may think, I'm not an idiot. I'm quite a streetwise guy, and
Yeah,
when I ended up in this position, and I'm like, I knew that I wasn't going to survive. The business wasn't going to survive. I
yeah,
thought I will figure this out, like I've
yeah.
done with everything else in my life. I figure
Hmm.
things out, and I've gone round and I've gone to speak to insolvency practitioners,
Yeah,
some real big insolvency practitioners. Um, and looking back, they wasn't. I'm not saying they was doing anything wrong, but they wasn't telling me the whole truth. It was very much a case of, well, listen, give us 5 grand and we'll deal with it. It all gets dealt with. And
yeah.
what wasn't told to me is, Chris, you've got an overdrawn director's loan account there. It's the
Oh,
biggest
sure.
thing to trip people up. And also, I just got spoke to like I was an idiot or I was a criminal. And it was like I left these meetings so disheartened because the person I've just sat with has told me something slightly different to the person I spoke to yesterday. And I'm just confused. And I eventually found an insolvency practitioner who I could talk to, or I felt I could talk to, and even knows that there was something they didn't quite tell me the truth about. And I just thought there's got to be a better way here. There was nobody out there really asking, giving direct answers to questions that directors had. And I thought, well, listen, if we sort of pride ourselves on being really transparent and getting all problems out on the table before we ask any money,
Yeah,
maybe we'll differentiate ourselves from everyone else. And you know what? There are people out there. I see it. I've seen it recently on social media. There's firms who will go, don't speak to an advisor come straight to a licensed insolvency practitioner. And there are probably bad advisors out there, but like we are, I've been through the process, so I know what to watch out for. I work with licensed insolvency practitioners who have had their license years and years and years. And
Yeah.
I've got more reviews on Trustpilot than anyone else in the whole industry. So we know we're starting to ruffle a few feathers. But you know what? Before we get into this, can you briefly introduce yourself, Imran, and tell us a little bit about the business before it started to go downhill a bit?
Of course. So yeah, to begin with, I came fresh out of uni. I started a home business, buying and selling goods from a local wholesaler, not a buck to my name. Sort of started selling, asked the gentleman at the store if I could pay him his minimum order at the end of the week. He gratefully agreed. It was literally very small. We're talking about 10 pieces, 12 pieces. Slowly you grow to 100 pieces. Working out of a box, then working out of a shed, then working out of a garage, and then working out of an industrial warehouse. In the midst of it, you had things along the lines. E-commerce had just taken off. COVID came along, and the business grew, and the business grew. I needed more help and more stock, and basically more money, more expenses, and everything grew. I mean, growth is a dream. I still stand by. I think you always got to push. You got to push yourself as hard as you can and keep going. Never give up. But like I said earlier, when um, when businesses take a very drastic change, you also have to step back and say, if I keep going, I'm going to drown. And the last thing you want to do is drown. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so initially, I actually started looking around for advice on how to close the business. Just reading online. I didn't actually know what insolvency was, to be honest with you. Um, I can wholeheartedly say that the Director First channel answered many of my questions. And I think I'd advise a lot of businesses, even if you're not at a point of insolvency, even if it's just a sort of a speed bump, at least know your options. Because
Mm-hmm.
should the worst happen, it happened to me at very short notice. It wasn't expected, but here we are. And the Director First team will answer all of your questions sort of impartially, which is very personalized because I spoke to liquidation companies, and you're right, you're very right. Actually, they give you the black and white of what you need to know, not everything you need to know. They're quite happy. For example, if you're looking at options like I believe it's called a pre-pack. If you go for a pre-pack, they will. You still need to keep some business relations going. It's healthy. These are relationships you've built over years. Where an insolvency firm just wants to screw everybody. So if you go to the wrong one, you have to be very careful. And you know what? You can talk on a person to person level with an advisor. Um, Ask any questions because in every business, there's sort of it's personalized to that business, and let's just say an advisor is able to put themselves into your position, and when they're answering the questions, they're thinking about it from your perspective. Whereas an insolvency practitioner is just yes, no, and that's that kind of thing.
I think the dynamic that people don't always get is, and by the way, like if you're going into liquidation administration, a CVA, you need a licensed insolvency practitioner. Okay.
Yeah,
But what people don't understand is an insolvency practitioner, they are there not for the director. They are there to represent the creditors. They are there to represent HMRC. They're there to investigate. They are there to realise funds to repay creditors. They're
yeah,
there to look for wrongdoing. Now, in the same breath, there are some really good insolvency practitioners out there. There are some really bad ones,
yeah.
much like there are really good advisors and there are some terrible ones out there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But the key thing is most directors of this size, they need someone to hold their hand. They need someone to give them some advisory first before they
Yeah,
make any decisions. Now, we don't charge for this. We literally do not charge a director. We make money from the introduction to the insolvency practitioner firm. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So we still need that insolvency practitioner doing the insolvency practitioner's job. But most directors, they need somebody holding their hand, discussing with them, is there going to be an asset sale here? How are you going to pay for the assets? Over what terms are you going to pay for the assets? Have you got an overdrawn loan account? Right. Can you afford to pay it back? We do a lot of the work, the uncomfortable, nasty work that normally goes on after the liquidation. We do it up front. So you
Yeah.
then you know exactly what it is that's going to cost you, and you know how you're going to pay for it and over what timescales. And again, that is the big difference between what we do here and what most other firms do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I've been seeing in the media sort of with the new budget, more businesses are closing than ever. And I'll just speak to your audience and say, it, just if you're struggling in your business, don't drown yourself, don't do your health out, don't stop eating and sleeping. Talk to people, talk to the specialists, get some advice. Whether you go ahead or you don't, that's between you and them. But
Mm-hmm.
knowledge is power. You rather know where you stand and your options, as opposed to being pushed into a corner and then it's sort of too little, too late.
And for us, a lot of inquiries is whatever you do, don't liquidate. Like if you liquidate, I had one this morning. The guy has been advised to liquidate, but he has something called an intercompany loan. So
Okay.
his trading business has lent his property business lots of money over the years, about 300,000 quid.
Yep.
And the property business is now strong. And I've said, well, if you liquidate this business,
The other
we
one.
have to follow the money for the three. It's going to bring the property company down. He says, oh, I didn't know that. I says, how on earth have you not been told that already? Because he hadn't just spoken to me.
Yeah.
Now, the cynic in me says that the other firms were he's asked the question, what's it going to cost to liquidate? Oh, it's 5 grand to wrap up. Okay, great. So he's answered the question honestly. But what happens is once you liquidate, the insolvency practitioner then goes for the property firm. And I've said, listen, that property firm's strong. You're going to have to pay all that money back. You are better off not liquidating and fighting your way through and paying those debts off. Now, listen, we've
Yeah.
lost a job there, but
Yeah.
that guy he just had a world of hell coming towards him if he'd have followed the advice that he'd been given off another company.
Yeah, no, I can totally believe that. I mean, uh, advice is everything and knowledge is everything. It's one of those situations where, for him as well, I can totally understand it. Why? Because he's probably drowning on one side, floating on the other side, and he's confused. Oh, let me just get rid of the drowning side. It makes perfect
Mm.
sense to the likes of me. Business people brains, I'd say, are pretty simple. We don't like to complicate things. We think about things very logically, but there is a big element of the black and white, which I'll be honest with you, if as you said earlier, you guys don't charge for advice. If you did charge for advice, I would be broke because the amount I did, my advisor's name was Sean. What a gentleman. Honestly and truthfully, it was like talking to a friend more than anything. And I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, I grew up working in sales. I know salespeople and I know authentic people. This is, he cares. I'll put it to you like that.
He's my younger brother. He's my younger brother. He's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
He said he's the better looking one, but that's up to you two to decide.
debatable. It's not him we put on film, is it? We keep him hidden away.
You keep him hidden away for a reason, don't you?
But listen, we do we care because I mean I've been in business in various guises. We're coming up to 20 years,
Yes.
and what I've realised over 20 years is most people are full of shit. If you
Yep.
forgive my language, like they'll say
Yep.
one
No, I'd
thing
agree. Yep.
and they just don't deliver. And that
Yep.
might be, I've been waiting for a plumber to go and fit a new shower at a property of mine for 3 weeks. And
Yeah.
it's always been, yeah, I'll be here. Oh, can't do
I'll
it.
get round
Oh,
to it. I'll get round
yeah.
to it. Yeah.
And there's a whole countless experiences like that in every single sector where people just let you down. They'll say something and they
Yeah.
might really mean it when they're saying it. Okay.
Yeah,
But when it actually comes
comes
to
down to
dealing
it.
with it, they let you down. And like someone said to me, Chris, and he had an issue with his job, just something come out of the woodwork, and he hadn't declared it. And he says, Chris, what I really like about you guys is how you handle problems. Because that's the problem. We deal with it head on. Like
Yeah,
literally, you know, guess what? We've made the odd mistake over the
yeah,
years, and
yeah.
like we don't shy away from that. We're not. We don't make many. We do not make many. But if you can just stand out and don't even over deliver. Just do what you say you're going to do. Turn
Yeah.
up when you say you're going to turn up. Charge what you say you're going to
Gonna
charge.
charge, yeah. Under promise and over provide, as they say.
Yeah, and answer the phone when you took someone's money. That's a good one. Keep
No,
answering the phone even though they paid you a long time ago. And I just think your reputation builds.
no, I say this to my dad quite a lot. I say you're an old mind in a new world, and unfortunately, I miss the old world when you'd shake somebody's hand and they'd give you what they say they would. A handshake was a contract as far as we were concerned. Everybody looked after each other, and the world was beautiful. But unfortunately, these days it's not the case. Like you say, there's a lot of people out there. Snakes in the grass. You've got to be careful. My
And
experience in this liquidation field was uh, I don't know if I could even call it pleasant, but it was pleasant as because I know it can be such a messy situation. I was stressed beyond belief. Yet the company's been liquidated. Um, we you know we pre-pack and we're off again, and hopefully, because I always hear that in business people do go bankrupt. You do fail once or twice because you learn. At the end of the day, you'll make mistakes. The second time round, now you've learned from those mistakes. See, for me, what I in my mentality has always been, if there's no business people, there's no jobs. And ultimately, I love the people. I like to see people do well. I like to see families blossom, and parents take their kids on holiday, you name it. But if I can't keep a business going to keep your people employed, that whole web of the whole family nucleus it disappears. So business people, we have to keep going, although it's getting harder out there. You got to keep going.
it is it is brutal at the moment. I mean, when you sort of first realised that the business might need to go into some type of insolvency process, um, how did you feel? What were your fears and concerns back then?
So with me, it was very little time to think because we basically lost a big chunk of our income overnight. And in e-commerce, it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, your chances of coming back quickly are low. And at this point, we had X amount of outgoings, and all of a sudden the income's chopped. And so it became very apparent very quickly, okay, I'm going to drown here. Let me seek advice. So I spoke to a couple of companies, and like you say, um, they tell you what you need to know. Maybe they don't tell you the full picture. My brain, my mentality is I like to dig. I like to understand as much as I can of a process before I sign anything, especially in the world of double glazing salesmen. You have to knowledge is power, as they say. So I'd called many companies. I'd called yourself, your own firm must have been 5, 6 times just to be certain. I'd read Google reviews, I'd read Trustpilot reviews, um, and you know what? I got to a point where I thought, ultimately, I mean, it's between um, doing the best that you can in this position, and for me, most of my positive advice which was actually useful to me, came from director first. So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go with the company that's basically held my hand through the whole process, because it got to a point where I had asked all my questions. I had answers I was happy with. I've jotted them all down. I've got my notes. Now I could literally go anywhere, but you build such a rapport or a bond with the team that you think, you know what, they're going to help me through this.
Hey,
And it's,
hey, So you got suckered in by us, didn't you? Our sneaky business model to
Do,
give
do,
so much free information away, it's worked, hasn't it?
but do you know what? On the other end of it, I can say it worked for everybody, and that's business, isn't
Yeah.
it? We shake each
Yeah.
other's hand, and we both come out. You got business out of it, and I got out of a situation with it. So we're both
Yeah.
happy, as far as I'm concerned. It's a good deal all round, you know.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
that's
cost of
it.
business, as they say, isn't it?
And, and do you know what? That we know that, and every time we lose a job, we might lose a job a week, but someone who just wants to pick our brains and go elsewhere. And listen, it happens. But
Yes.
I've said to everyone, I says, listen, I says, if you're free with your time, if you're just honest, open, transparent, you do not have to sell. It will sell itself because
Yeah.
we know what our competition's like.
Yeah.
We know our competition won't spend the time we will spend on it. We
Yeah.
know the competition don't answer the phone when we answer the phone. We know that the competition will shy away from the 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 nasty side of it. I mean, yours was really simple, but sometimes we've got to get everything out on the table and say to a director, "Listen, you've got serious problems coming, possible
Yes.
bankruptcy, you
Yeah.
know, possible disqualification. Your house is at risk." Now, most people will not go into that level of detail. They'd rather do it once they've got the job safe. Whereas we'll like get, and that'll scare people off. They'll go, you know, I, I, I had a guy the other day, he's rang me and he's going, Chris, what's the cost to liquidate? And he was having to pre-pack, but quite a large pre-pack. And I says, you're so misguided here. I says, the 5 grand, it's insignificant to you.
Yeah.
We're probably the insolvency practitioner on this is going to bill about 25 grand on your job, 100%, because there was lots of assets to recover, quite high numbers. Um, and I says, no one else has told you that, have they? He went, no. He says they've just been quoting me 2, 3, or 4 grand plus VAT. I said, that's not.
Yeah.
I says
That's the
it's
bait on the end of the hook, isn't it? Unfortunately,
yeah,
you
and
know,
and,
it's like they
and
say. Sometimes, I mean, there's always somebody cheaper on the internet for starters.
mm,
For me, one of my biggest pushes, aside from obviously the customer service, was your reviews online. They speak for themselves. I read through them, and like you say, insolvency practitioners as a whole unit, there's not a great deal of information about them themselves, even on their own Google pages. I mean, I've got local firms. I've seen firms afar, and maybe one review, and you can't get much out of that, to be honest with you.
it's I mean, we have. I think this year we've probably got 300 and I don't know 328, and like it could be treble that, but some people just don't want to stick their head above the parapet. So we
Yeah,
I mean, but listen, I get it, I do get it, but we're grateful for those reviews because it's like, and I train people with this as well. It's like we'll have different reviews. One of them will, Sean was very helpful. That's not much of a helpful review to you looking in.
yeah,
What you want to be doing is looking at somebody who's written a detailed account of what their experience was like.
yeah,
Because it's so easy for us to get a review going, oh, was that helpful? Just write us a nice little review on Trustpilot. And we do that, by the way. We do that, okay? But what a review on Trustpilot that actually comes from someone who's been through the process, and you can see them on the Trustpilot page because they're a little bit more detailed. I mean,
yeah.
you can have someone with 500 reviews on Trustpilot, and all any review is, "Oh, great company, didn't want
Yeah.
any money."
Nice people.
That says to me they've never gone through the process.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Can
yeah.
I
So,
ask?
gone.
Oh, sorry. No, go on. Sorry for
No,
interrupting.
I was just gonna sum up in a world of uncertainty. I think the reviews speak for themselves. Anybody in my position a couple months ago, call, reach out, and hopefully, I hope for their sake that they find an end to the stress and sleepless nights.
100%. Let me. let me ask you this question. So, um, what was the actual process of liquidation like for you?
For me, it was a very straightforward process. I was contacted to ask some specifics about the company, the financials, any debts, any owings, any company director loans. It's always good to get your finances in order and know what you have and what you don't have, what you owe and who you owe. You jot it down on a form, send it away, and you will be contacted by the actual insolvency practitioner. Um, and from then on, they will request your accounts, and I suppose it would depend on how big or small your situation is. Mine, I believe, was considered a pretty straightforward situation, so it was from tip to toe, I believe, 2 months, and it was done. They look through the finances. They arrange a meeting with anybody who's owed. In my case, funnily enough, none of the those owed even logged into the phone call. So it was a very, very smooth situation. That was 21 days after the first sort of reachings out. And then the company was formally put into liquidation. And as far as I'm aware, it's more or less finished now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a process now of liquidation to dissolution. It might take 12 months, but
Yep.
your part is done.
Yep.
And I think people expect, something else. It's like they expect like a real big hoo-ha and for most people, it's just like, was that it?
I think I
Um,
expected, to be bluntly honest, I expected a bigger hoo-ha. But I was advised that my situation wasn't so drastic. And yeah, here we are on the other end, and it was very smooth, to be honest with you.
and I think most creditors don't turn up to creditors meetings. Most, like
Yeah,
literally, I mean, you've experienced that yourself. And
yeah,
even if
yeah.
they do, they can only talk to you about the company failure. And if someone gets on going, well, he's done this, he's done that, blah, blah, and they start to rant, they get kicked out of the call. So it's
Yeah, no,
with
I
regard.
think when you because I'd heard that prior on other videos where people have said, oh, they didn't even dial in, and in my head I was thinking, yeah, my guys are definitely dial in, they're gonna come for me, and nobody came. I was like, oh, here we go, it does happen then.
Because I remember getting super paranoid, me,
Yeah,
because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, everybody's found out now. That's it. That it'll be in the papers. Everyone will be talking about it. And there's just so many happening at the moment. Like literally, insolvencies are at an all-time high, 30
more,
year
more,
high.
more than ever. Yeah, more. And you know what? For me, and I'm sure even for you, you're in the game, but it's sad to see because some of these businesses have been around for longer than I've been alive, kind of thing. And I love to see people succeed, but it's just well, we won't go into the politics of it, but
You know what? It's sad. Listen, we have to deal with people every day who are on the precipice.
yeah,
Like literally, they're struggling to feed the kids.
yeah,
Some people will lose their houses because they
hmm,
can't afford to keep them anymore.
yeah, for sure.
Um, and most liquidations that I've been involved with over the years, the director's not done anything wrong. There's a change of circumstances. I mean, you've mentioned it yourself. Costs have gone through the roof, revenues have fallen down. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah,
These last few
mhm,
years, and again, yeah, I don't like to get into the politics of things, but I just think one thing is that for sure we've got some tough times to come. If you're in
very,
manufacturing, if you're in construction, if you
yeah,
are in hospitality, these are industries that at the moment are just you cannot see how it's going to pan out.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, um, anybody in the political world should really, really pay attention to the small businesses and the medium-sized businesses. The big boys, they seem to do all right, but it's the others who, once they start to disappear, which they are, unfortunately, it affects families, it affects everybody. There'll be no money circulating in the country, and like you say, it will be dark times.
With regards to sort of our service,
Hmm.
what aspect of direct to first service did you find most helpful or reassuring?
I'll be honest with you, the initial consultations with your brother were probably the most helpful to me because you can Google questions, you're not going to get a personalized answer, and then you think, oh, let me Google it to meet the e-commerce sort of industry, and you'll never get anything back. Now, as you can imagine, the internet's full of information, but it's never personalized to the person with the flower shop or the person with the barber shop or whatever it may be out there that who's in the struggling position. So I found that speaking it out with the advisor was by far the most helpful because they'd been through the situation with similar businesses to mine, and then what you can then do is ask, oh, so how did that person go through the process? What did they decide to do in the end? And you start to feel a little bit at ease because you think, all right, so I'm not the first person going through this, because in your head you think you are the first person going through this.
Mhm.
And then it's sort of from then on you draw a picture in your mind of where you are and where you can get to and what you need to do to get there.
No, it's and it is. It's that you can get some general principles online, but it's actually the practical application of how it sits your specific situation. That's what everybody needs to know. You mentioned earlier about some learning, some lessons that you've taken from this. Um, what were the key lessons? And looking back, what will you be doing differently in version 2?
Do you know, the honest truth is I still stand back because I'm my own biggest critic. I think most business people are. We try to perfect everything and make everything as perfect as we can. In my situation, it was a very circumstantial change, an external influence, nothing that I could have foreseen or sort of accounted for. So I think going forward, for me personally, I've taken a complete change on the whole business. And basically I've tried to never put myself in such a delicate situation because with the world of e-commerce, you sell 10, you buy 100, you sell 100, you buy 1,000. So your funds get sucked up very, very quickly. And I think for me, the one thing that I will do going forward is I'll sort of, instead of going all out full throttle, I'll sit back at 60, 70% and keep chugging away on the journey. And it's naivety on my part. Well, I am young. I was young when I started, and I'm learning every day as we go. But I think with everybody's journey, you learn different lessons and you just have to take away from it. Do I beat myself up over it? I don't, to be honest with you, because I think that's just the risk taker within me. I think we all try to push and we all want to make a buck. And, at the end of the day, if I can get a product to a customer and they're happy with the product and I make some profit margin and pay wages, I think that's great business.
Brilliant. Now, if you got any advice to other business owners who may be facing, you know, similar situations, robbing Peter to pay Paul, too much month at the end of the money, sales dropping, costs increasing, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be businesses out there who will have seen a gradual decrease in sales. There'll be businesses out there who will just, like myself, just have an overnight chop. And the one thing I would say to you is, I was in your position, I've been there. It's horrid. You literally can't think. You've got brain fog. You're trying to put a pen to paper and your mind's everywhere. You're thinking about one problem, then the next problem. How am I going to pay this person? How am I going to pay that person? My advice to you, take a breather. Have an evening to yourself, gather your thoughts, and write down all of your sort of outgoings, anything you owe, anything that you're expected to come in, and start to draw a picture in your head of where the business is. Can you afford to keep it going? Because my advice, to be honest, it's advice that I received and it's advice that I will give, is that if you are drowning, you rather let go early, as opposed to the whole ship sinking. because as you keep going, if you're running at a deficit, you're going to keep drowning. Finance is only going to get worse. If you don't do it now, you might have to do it in 3 4 months time, but it's a much bigger problem to get out of now. So be cautious and gain as much knowledge as you can. Ask as many questions as you can. There's a guy on YouTube, and he seems to have the answers to most of the questions. So give him a go.
And if he's not available, have a look at Director first.
I like that.
Listen, how do you feel now that the liquidation process is behind you, man?
Do you know what? A big weight, a big weight off my shoulders. I'm sleeping again, which is it's been a while. I'm eating again, which is not bad either. But more on a serious note, I took a bit of time out to sort of gather thoughts and see where I'm going to head with this now. New direction, new opportunity. You are essentially starting again, but you're starting again with the knowledge. You're starting again with the experience. You know where your weaknesses are, and you keep going. Don't give up.
That's it, mate. And listen, thank you for sharing your story with us. Is there any final words that you have for our viewers?
Yeah, I would say if you're having a hard time in business and you're not sure what tomorrow might bring, or maybe the sales are not there, maybe business is on a slow, and you're sort of in a stressful position, give Director First a call and at least get some advice.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you for joining
You
us,
take
Imran.
care.
I wish you all the best. Bless you, my friend. Bye bye.
Been a pleasure. God bless. Bye bye.
Bye bye.